It's important for everyone to know that the sheriff's office responsibility in this case was to gather the facts and come to a conclusion as to whether it was legally justified. My conclusion and opinion is that Officer Reaganance was in fear for his life and the other people around him. As with any other person, Officer Reaganance has the right to defend himself. But he has the duty to protect the other people. He had a duty to respond. First, I want to thank everybody for their patience in the last 9 days. It's been a difficult 9 days in the community, especially in the city of Celina. It's just been difficult. Things like this in small communities are very difficult. Before I get into that incident, I want to clarify something that has me pretty upset, and I'm hoping that the news media can help me get the word out. The Celina Daily Standard on April the 16th erroneously reported that this case was classified as a murder. The sheriff's office never implied and never said that this case was a murder. A murder implies a death was due to a crime. A homicide is the death of a person caused by another person, but it doesn't necessarily have criminal implications. While the Daily Standard printed that it was classified as a murder in the headline, the lead story on the front page, they printed a correction on the second page in small type, hidden where it was hard for people to find, including me when I knew it was on there. Many people saw the headline and not the correction. In my opinion, that was unprofessional and unfair. And I want to set the record straight. This case was never classified as a murder. And I understand mistakes get made. You guys have a job to do, the same as we have a job to do, and occasionally mistakes are made. But when a mistake is made, you have to own it. And hiding the correction on the second page was wrong, and I want the public to know that it was never classified as a murder. We're talking about a young officer's career, and it was just very unfair. Now, the report's been complete into the shooting of Robert Hensley. He was 39 years old from St. Mary's. The investigation consisted of interviews of 33 people. 5 of those people who actually witnessed the shooting. One of those 5 was Officer Reaganance, but the other 4 were private citizens with no connection to city government, county government, law enforcement, just 4 regular citizens. I want to point out that this incident occurred on April the 10th. It took the sheriff's office 9 days to investigate it. Officer Reaganance had a split second to make a decision, and he didn't have the benefit of knowing everything that we took 9 days to learn. The facts of the case that we found out during all of the interviews and the investigation was Robert Hensley purchased a .22 caliber revolver on March 18th, 2013 at Big Bucks Firearms. That is the firearm that he had in his possession at the time. I also want to point out that his record does not reflect anything that would disqualify him from purchasing a firearm. So it was a legal purchase. He had been exhibiting unusual behavior recently, including hearing voices. His family considered asking police to intervene so he could get help. We went back to April the 10th and started out that morning when Hensley got up at 7:30 in the morning. He left for Rabel's Auto to pick up his Jeep that was there for repairs at 8 o'clock in the morning. He paid the repair bill at 8:43 a.m. Then he came to Celina and went to Kramer's Guns. He was at Kramer's Guns. He arrived there at 10:03. He looked at some firearms in the gun case at Kramer's Guns, and then he went in and used the indoor range. He tried to leave Kramer's at about 10:35, but his car wouldn't start. So he went back into Kramer's and asked for some help to get his car started. They were unable to get it started. From 11:09 to 11:14, he was in McDonald's on the corner of Livingston Street and Grand Lake Road. During that 5 minutes in McDonald's, he didn't have his shirt on, and the majority of the time in McDonald's was spent in the restroom. He didn't buy anything, he wasn't up at the counter, but the time was spent in the restroom, and he went into the restaurant without his shirt on, which I think we all would agree in this day and age is unusual behavior. From McDonald's, he went to the Eagles. He arrived at the Eagles in Celina on State Route 703, not far from McDonald's, at 11:20. He was there from 11:20 until 12:22. He ate a tenderloin and a bologna sandwich. He drank a beer and he played a game of pool. While he was in the Eagles, he arrived at the Eagles without his shirt on. Had to be told to put his shirt on. While he was in there, he took his shirt off again. They had to tell him again to put his shirt back on. And then he tried to leave without paying his bill at the Eagles. One of the Eagles employees had to go out in the parking lot and ask him to come back in to pay his bill. At 12:27, he was back at his disabled vehicle at Kramer's Guns. At 12:38, he was walking on East Livingston Street near McDonald's, and he was twirling his gun. 911 received a call at that time, and that is the first call that we received about him walking down the street twirling his gun. At 12:44, we received another 911 call. And it said that he is now on Market Street near LeBlanc Street. It was the same 911 caller who called in the second call. At 12:46, Officer Regadance located Hensley in the parking lot at Lakeshore Auto Sales. At 12:46, during the same minute, Officer Regadance gets back on the radio, informs the dispatcher that shots were fired and that EMS was needed. The investigation of the shooting revealed that when Officer Regadance approached, Hensley had his back to Regadance. They were approximately 12 feet apart. Regadance had his hand on his gun, and he shouted commands at Hensley to stop and show his hands. Hensley stated he was packing. He draws the .22 caliber revolver with his left hand from a holster that was clipped in his right pocket. So it was like a cross draw. Hensley then turned aggressively to his left, bringing the gun around towards Officer Regadance. Officer Regadance then raised his gun and fired 2 shots from his .40 caliber firearm. One shot hit Hensley in the left arm between his elbow and shoulder and continued through his arm. One shot hit Hensley near his left shoulder blade and traveled through his torso and exited the right front side of his body. The angle of entry of both shots is consistent with the statements that Hensley was turning towards Regadance. Hensley dropped his gun and it was located near the body. Again, where the gun was located near the body is consistent with the statements from both Officer Regadance and the other 4 citizen eyewitnesses. Hensley's firearm had 2 spent rounds in the cylinder. The other 4 chambers were empty. It is unknown where those 2 rounds were discharged, but those 2 rounds were not discharged during this incident. They possibly were discharged when he was on the range at Kramer's, but they were not fired during the incident. As I said before, Officer Regadance immediately radioed for EMS for help for Hensley. It'll be several weeks before we have toxicology reports back from the autopsy, but I want to stress that toxicology reports may help us to understand why Hensley was acting in an unusual behavior, but they have no bearing on whether the shooting was legally justified. It's important for everyone to know that the sheriff's office responsibility in this case was to gather the facts and come to a conclusion as to whether it was legally justified. My conclusion and opinion is that Officer Regadance was in fear for his life and the other people around him. As with any other person, Officer Regadance has the right to defend himself, but he has the duty to protect the other people. He had a duty to respond. My heart goes out to the Hensley family and the loss of their loved one. It's tragic. I really feel for them to lose a loved one in this manner, but my heart also goes out to Officer Regadance. We all take an oath to protect the public. We all know that an incident like this could occur during our career, but we all hope and pray that it never does. No officer ever wants to take someone's life. This report is now being turned over to the prosecutor's office for review and opinion. I do not have the final say in this case. I'm not a lawyer. The prosecutor needs to review the case. I am recommending to the prosecutor that after he reviews the case, since there was a loss of life, that the case be presented to a grand jury. I'm not recommending that because I think there was a violation of the law. I'm recommending that because I think it's the right thing to do. And law enforcement officers, we work for the public. We don't work for the prosecutor, we don't work for the court, we work for the people. The grand jury is made up of citizens. And when an incident such as this happens, it's important that the citizens have the opportunity to review and not just accept my opinion of the shooter. I'll take questions now. If anyone has any questions.
Could you go into some detail about the situation with Officer Regadance being off work for a period of time before the shooting?
No, I can't. That's outside the purview of our investigation. Our investigation and what we were asked to do focused on that time of arrival at the car lot and the shooting. Anything that happened before or after has no bearing on whether the shooting was justified or not. Those things would be an internal City of Celina process, so I would direct any questions on any disciplinary issues to the City of Salina.
Can you just, would it be accurate then to say that your opinion on the report is that it appears the shooting was justified?
Yes, it's very accurate. I believe that Officer Regadance was in fear for his life. There were two other people that were in very, very close proximity to Hensley at the time. And of course, nobody had the benefit of knowing that that firearm was unloaded until after the incident. And not only do I think that he had the right to defend himself, I really think that police officers have the duty to protect the public. And so not only was he defending himself, he was defending the two people that were there in close proximity.
Can you remind people again that the decision he had to make was in fact split seconds?
That's correct. You know, this whole thing, well, he radioed out at 12:46 and he called for EMS at 12:46. I mean, those things come right off of the log. So the whole time, from the time he got out of his car until the incident was over, was less than a minute. The decision that he had to make was a split-second decision that he had to make as Hensley turned with the firearm. He had to make a decision right at that point. And like I say, we've had 9 days to review it, to talk to people, to evaluate what he did. And I think in any officer-involved shooting, it's important for people to realize officers are making a snap judgment, and then the administrative people and the investigating agency has as much time as it takes to review it. If we wouldn't have been able to come to a conclusion by this point, we could have taken another week. We have all the time that it takes to try to gather the facts.
Was there any indication from Hensley's family if he had had long-term mental illness issues, or did it seem like it had only been recently?
They talked about it being worse recently, like in the last couple of weeks. And his, like I say, my heart goes out to his family. His family has been very cooperative with our investigators. Spent some time up here, and we have talked to the family, given them our conclusions so that they knew ahead of time. And I've also met with the mayor and safety service director and the assistant chief of police last night, just to tell them, because I felt the professional thing to do was for me to tell them, not have them get the information from the news. Any other questions?
So at this point, the investigation is complete?
I'm not taking questions from the standard. Any other questions?
My apologies for coming in late. Did Hensley have what kind of background did he have? Did he have a criminal background?
He had some criminal background. It wasn't anything serious. I believe he had a disorderly conduct and a DUI back in the 90s and early 2000s. He didn't have any criminal conduct recently. And the little bit that was on his record wasn't terrible.
And what kind of mental illness did he have?
That I don't know. We got the information on his unusual behavior from his family when we interviewed them.
How did the family receive the news?
How were they told?
Oh, no. Were they seemingly agreeable to your conclusions, or did they dispute those?
They did not dispute them. I would hesitate to say they were agreeable. I mean, they listened. They didn't dispute them. I think in some ways they're still in shock. I think they knew there was some problems, and they were trying to figure out how to deal with the problems. And then, of course, this happens unexpectedly, I guess, for them. Any other questions? All right, thank you.